All right, next up is kidney structure. So in this section, we're going to talk about the different regions of the kidney. There are 3 specific regions of the kidney. There's going to be the renal cortex, which is going to be this outermost layer that kind of like dips down in between the inner layer. This inner layer, this portion right here, is called the renal medulla. The renal medulla consists of the cone-shaped tissue masses that are called renal pyramids. So that'll be these thin little structures right in here that you can, there we go, lost my mouse. So it'll be these thin little cone-shaped structures found in there, and we'll see those a little bit closer up later on. Those are called renal pyramids. And then inside this sort of the innermost layer, moving from the outside inward, we have the renal pelvis. So this is going to be the central space that is continuous with the ureter. So this is where we're going to be filtering and then collecting all of the urine and then passing it out through the ureter. All right, so kidneys are going to be composed of over 1 million nephrons. Nephrons are like the microscopic filtration unit of the kidney. So if you take that kidney, you look at those renal pyramids and you break them down as small as you can go, here is what you're going to be looking at, is the nephron. So the nephrons are going to be responsible for filtering the blood and ultimately producing the urine. And there are going to be several nephrons that are going to empty the urine into a single collecting duct. Those collecting ducts are then going to all travel together. It's kind of like how your circulatory system has all of the branching structures coming off of it. Your urinary system does the same. We're going to have all of these filter into the collecting duct. The collecting ducts are going to empty into that renal pelvis. So in order to support the nephron, we're going to need a good amount of blood supply. So from the renal artery, we have the afferent arterioles. Those are going to transport the blood to the glomerulus, which is just a knot of capillaries inside the glomular capsule. And then we have efferent arterioles, which are going to carry the blood away from the glomerulus. So we have the blood going in and the blood coming out. The blood pressure is going to be higher in the glomerulus than anywhere else in the body because of the afferent arteriole is narrower than the efferent arteriole is going to be narrower than the afferent arterioles. The efferent arterioles are going to empty into the peritubular capillary network. So that's going to be this region right over here. This is going to surround the rest of the nephron. This is where the blood is going to go into the venule and carry the blood back into the renal vein. So the blood gets dropped off here. Here we use the glomerulus to change the blood pressure and to begin the transition or the flow through this capillary network where we can filter out the blood and then take it back to the heart. So there are a couple of different parts of the nephron, and we're going to go through each one of those. But we're going to start off with the glomular capsule. So that's going to be this right over here. The outer layer is made out of squamous epithelial cells, and the inner layer is going to be made of podocytes. These are going to cover the glomerulus, leaving small pores that allow the molecules from the blood inside the glomerulus out into the glomular capsule. After we pass through the glomerulus, we're going to move into the proximal convoluted tubule. So this is going to be made out of cuboidal epithelial cells. They're going to have a lot of microvilli that form the brush border. These are going to ultimately help, well, why? Actually, let me pause for a second. What would be the benefit of having this region lined with those epithelial cells that have that microvilli, that have that brush border? Well, think about the purpose. The purpose of this is going to be filtration from the bloodstream into the urinary system. So what we want is a lot of surface area. We want a lot of contact between the circulatory system and the urinary system. And we're going to do this by increasing the surface area with that brush border. So here is the proximal convoluted tubule, and then we're going to branch down into what is known as the loop of the nephron, or the loop of Henle. This is going to have a descending limb and an ascending limb. Each is going to have different permeabilities to water and solutes. Each is going to have their own particular role for what they're responsible for filtering out and returning to the bloodstream. So once we pass through that loop of Henle, we're going to then move into the distal convoluted tubule. Now, the primary function of this is going to be ion exchange between the blood and the renal tubule. So the distal convoluted tubules of several nephrons are going to enter into a single collecting duct, which then carries that urine that we have made away to that renal pelvis. So the glomerular capsule and the convoluted tubules always lie within the renal cortex. The loop of this nephron is going to dip down into that renal medulla. So if we're going to back up just a little bit, most of that upper region is going to be found up here in the renal cortex, but that loop of Henle dips down here into the renal medulla. So these collecting ducts are going to be, well, the glomerular capsule and the convoluted tubules, like I said, these are going to be located up in the renal cortex, and then that loop of Henle dips down into the renal medulla, and the collecting ducts are also going to be located down in this renal medulla. And so this is going to give that renal pyramids their sort of striped appearance. All right, and that's it for this section. You should name the 3 major areas of a kidney, describe the path of blood and fluids in the nephron, and explain the difference between the distal and the proximal convoluted tubules. Their differences is going to be primarily at this stage. We've really only talked about their location and the flow of urine through these convoluted tubules, but in our next section we're going to talk more specifically about urine formation and what's going on in each of those 3 regions. So while all 3 of these are important, I know that we haven't really broken down the specific regions, so we'll be getting into that in our next section.